Welcome, everyone. My name is Nina Benoit, and I'm the Director of Systemity at Brightest, host of the AI Systemity podcast, and keynote speaker on AI and Systemity. For first-time listeners, this podcast talks about all things related to artificial intelligence and sustainability, exploring how AI can have a positive impact on our planet and our people, and what potential limitations or risks we need to be aware of. Today, I'm very happy to welcome Alison Taylor. Alison is a clinical professor at NYU Stern School of Business. She's also a leading advisor at large corporates and the author of the book Higher Grounds. Her work has been key to helping leaders navigate the ethical and governance implications of new technologies like AI on sustainability and corporate culture. So, Alison, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It really is an honor to have you here and to help us understand how leaders can successfully integrate AI into the sustainability strategies today.
Good morning, Nina. It's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. So starting off with the first question of this podcast. So you have spent many years in consulting before moving into academia. What motivated that shift, and how do you think that corporate experience shaped the way you teach and research today?
Gosh, well, I think it was wanting a career change. As you said, I spent many years in consulting, in private sector consulting, also in nonprofit consulting, exploring various dimensions of ethics, sustainability, political risk, compliance, all sorts of topics. And as I started to think about the rest of my career, I wanted to contribute in a different way. I started teaching while I had a full-time job, and I discovered I was really good at it. I discovered I liked being in the classroom. I found it very fulfilling. I found it very dynamic. So since the beginning of 2023, this has been my full-time job, but I'm not a career academic. My currency in the classroom is being relevant and meeting students, especially MBA students, where they are, showing that I understand what it's like to work in a real organization. So even though the majority of my life is in the classroom, it's very important for me to stay engaged in the real world and be working with real corporations, real associations. And so I do a lot of that as well as a lot of writing.
That's amazing. And I think that is so key to stay connected, obviously, with the business world as a professor, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so your best-selling book, Higher Grounds, talks about how leaders can achieve long-term strategic advantage in a turbulent world. What role do you think AI will take in helping or preventing leaders from taking the right decisions for the planet?
You know, AI is clearly a powerful, transformative technology. Maybe we can get into the intricacies of sustainability in a little while. I think the most profound challenge it presents leaders today is, what is it going to do to roles and organizational culture, and what human beings you need to do what tasks, which is a very simple way of putting something very, very complicated. I think we're all seeing there is a lot of press reporting about the AI race and who's going to win the AI race and what this will do to productivity and what this will do to profit. And I think we've seen a lot of kind of boosterism and a lot of predictions that this is going to, transform value and make money not worth anything anymore. And now, more recently, I think we're seeing those productivity gains are not really coming to the fore. And there is starting to be an understanding that this is maybe not a technology problem. This is a human problem. Something can look very good on paper, but what we've actually got to do is to think about how everything about work gets done. And I fear that leaders are going to learn this the painful way. It's not a perfect analogy, but when we think about COVID and how that pushed everybody to remote work and more flexibility and appeared to be presenting a kind of transformative strategic challenge, but it doesn't seem like those lessons lasted. As soon as COVID was over, CEOs forced employees back into the office. So I think we've got another opportunity right now to rethink organizations and to rethink work and to think responsibly about these tools. I'm somewhat worried we're going to learn those lessons in a very painful way and in the hard way, not the easy way.
And I think that's a great analogy to compare COVID and AI. I think we can both see revolutions in the way we are working. So interesting to see, as you said, if we're going to learn it the painful way or not.
Right.
And so how would you advise sustainability leaders to redesign governance structures so that AI-driven decisions are transparent and aligned with long-term ESG goals?
I mean, I think one question we need to ask is whether this should be the responsibility of the sustainability team. The sustainability team has, for very good reasons, and I'm speaking from the US right now, there are a lot of political pressures on sustainability right now. This is also underway in the EU. There has been a lot of restructuring. There has been, I think, a sense that there is a need to focus on value creation. So I guess I'm going to argue that the questions posed by AI are ethics and governance questions. And I think somewhat sustainability leads have dropped the ball on that. So because there has been such a focus on the business case aspect of sustainability, I think there has been underplaying of the kind of ethics and values dimensions here. So to the degree it is up to one team to lead on this, and I'm not sure that's true either, I would probably frame this primarily as a human rights problem or perhaps as an ethics and governance problem. Now, a good sustainability team will have a seat at the table there, but I think we have a problem in sustainability that we think everything's a sustainability problem. And I'm not sure how that is how most corporate leaders think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So who do you think should be the person in charge? Then do you think that falls more into HR, potentially legal teams?
The organization's got to make a collective decision. I mean, I think that's something else we can kind of say about corporations today. When any new problem arises, there's a tendency to have a chief, a chief happiness officer, a chief AI officer, during COVID, a chief medical officer. And so this is not a thing, I think, that you can give to one person or one role. This is something that the organization needs to think through. So I would certainly want HR at the table. I would certainly want sustainability at the table. I would certainly want an ethics or human rights team at the table. I would certainly want strategy, the CFO at the table. But I think I think the imperative for an organization is to make collective decisions and be thoughtful, see what mistakes are being made, and maybe most importantly, to not feel the pressure to rush into this. I hear from a lot of students who are sort of saying their CEO is saying, you've got to be good at AI to get on around here now. I think there is perhaps a need to have the courage to slow down. I think you will get faster over time if you give real thought to what instructions and what direction you're giving to employees. I think we can see there is a lot of skepticism from employees and the general public about whether this will be good for them, whether this will be good for jobs, whether this will be good for finances. So rather than having a message from the top that you've got to roll out and use these tools no matter what, or you're going to fall behind and you're going to get fired, I think what we've got to do is understand what problems AI can solve and what problems AI can't solve, and then what we need people to do. And so maybe you can go faster by slowing down.
That is a very good summary indeed. And so what new skill set and mindset do you think sustainability leaders need to develop as AI becomes a core part of businesses?
Oh, I mean, I think most sustainability leaders that I work with would agree that sustainability is primarily an organizational change imperative. And I think AI is also an organizational change imperative. So thinking about thoughtful impact analysis would be one very obvious place to sit. We don't just focus exclusively on what this might or might not do to short-term shareholder value. We think about the impact that these products and services and tools are having on our employees, on our customers, on our suppliers. And so I think a good place for sustainability to start is with deep stakeholder engagement and deep impact analysis, which is a technique, it's a methodology, that the sustainability team likely has deep expertise in. So there, I think as well, you can get other of your colleagues in the room, you can get experts, you can get consultants to advise you. So I suppose I would start with a human impact analysis here.
That is absolutely a good strategy, and I think those human skills are for sure key right now. And so when a company adopts a new ESG AI tool, what would you advise it to do to make sure that ethical considerations are aligned with its sustainability strategy?
I think one question would be how useful this tool really is. Certainly, AI analysis can help you pull together your ESG report faster. So that's one kind of question. How can we use these tools responsibly? I think in certain sectors, notably tech, AI presents a very inconvenient story. For a long time, tech leaders and tech companies have emphasized their environmental credentials, downplayed their social risks. Now I think they're having a hard time telling that story because of the level of energy, for example, data centers need. So I think there becomes a very kind of complicated account of how you are going to grow and account for your energy use. I hear a lot of rhetoric. For example, there was a paper in Nature that got discussed a lot by the sustainability community, sort of talking about the gains that AI can bring in certain sectors and how these would, it was argued, cancel out the environmental impact. Hard not to miss that that paper was written by a Microsoft employee. So there are, I think, a lot of vested interests here. There are a lot of conflicts of interest here. And I think the onus is on the sustainability team to not fall prey to that kind of boosterism and to help the organization stop and be a little bit more thoughtful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is definitely a famous study that I also had a look at, and that was discussed a lot. So glad that you're mentioning that one. And I think that it is definitely a very good analysis that sustainability teams need to be careful when they're implementing tools, making sure that obviously the savings in times they're making is valuable enough, right? And also considering what is the environmental impact of the tools they're using.
Yes, exactly.
And so looking ahead, how do you envision the role of sustainability professionals evolving as generative AI and autonomous systems become more prevalent in corporate sustainability initiatives?
Well, hopefully it cuts some of the grunt work. I mean, I think sustainability is having a broader reckoning about how to integrate more into the business. We've certainly seen reporting, for example, increasingly move under the CFO or under compliance. We're seeing more regulatory pressure. So I think a lot of organizations are struggling with what does this team do and where does it sit? And so, I suppose the answer is going to very much depend company by company, but we want the sustainability team to have a voice at the table, both on environmental impact and on social impact. So to me, this is also an imperative to maybe step away from the obsession we've seen over the past few years with having a business case for everything, and to start to understand that at the end of the day, the role of sustainability teams is to think about impact first and foremost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think when you start merging AI and sustainability, this becomes a little bit tricky, right? As you're trying to blend in something which is about productivity, saving times, potentially, to something where it's more about the impact you're having.
Yeah, and so I think rather than just classifying everything as a sustainability issue, which maybe does not lead to sustainability teams having the power and credibility we might imagine, what we have to do is to help sustainability teams understand what their primary role is and to try and clarify and professionalize that, which probably doesn't mean they're leading on AI because AI is an organizational problem. It does mean somebody internally needs to have a voice at the table in making sure the organization is being thoughtful over the long term about both its environmental and social impact. And that should inform decisions about what to do.
Absolutely. So this was the last question. Anything else that you would like to add, Alison?
Yeah, I mean, you haven't asked about it, but I think something I spend a lot of time thinking about is AI in the classroom. And I think there's a good analogy there. You can deal with AI in the classroom and the reality that 100% of students are now using LLMs and AI tools to complete their assignments. You can ban it. you can have a AI policy in your syllabus, that's kind of papering over a crack. What you've actually really got to do is reimagine how you educate and what the primary skills are you're teaching for. So that's a perfect analogy for what's going on in organizations. You can have a policy, you can have a governance approach, you can treat this like, any other risk. What you've actually got to do is reimagine how work gets done.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And how do you deal with that personally as a professor with all of your students using AI?
I think it's an emerging topic. I have a no screens policy in the room. 60% of my grade is not written work. It's live presentation and live discussion. I am assuming that students are using these tools to write their papers. So I've redesigned how the papers are written. Many of my colleagues moving to handwriting and getting rid of electronic submissions altogether. But I think this is an evolving conversation in universities.
Definitely very interesting to hear the strategies you're using. I also talked about this topic in a panel discussion in the university in the Netherlands, and it's very interesting to hear the way you're going about it, and potentially some work to do here to align between universities on how to deal with this issue, right?
Lots of work to do. I think it's definitely an evolving live issue that everybody in education is thinking about 24/7.
For sure. Perhaps an interesting other podcast episode to do on that, dedicated to that topic.
Absolutely.
Fantastic, Alison. This has been a really insightful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise on what the future of sustainability leadership in the age of AI might be, and also sharing your thoughts on education as a professor. And to everyone listening, if you found this episode valuable, please make sure to like and comment on this episode, share it with someone who might enjoy it or benefit from this discussion, and don't forget to follow if you don't already. You can also connect with Alison and with me on LinkedIn to keep up with our work. So thank you so much for joining, Alison.
Thank you so much for having me, Nina.
Fantastic. My name is Nina Benoit, and this is the AI Sustainability Podcast. See you next time.